to Haunted Talks, the official podcast of the Haunted Walk, offering thematic walking tours and paranormal adventures in Kingston, Ottawa, and Toronto, Ontario. My name is Jim Dean, I am the creative director, and I really appreciate you joining us for today's show. One of the best things about the Halloween season, besides our tours of course, are the many haunted houses that spring up. They range from very professional, big-budget entertainment, such as Knott's Scary Farm, a seasonal Halloween event at Knott's Berry Farm in Buena Park, California, which first started terrifying guests in 1973. It's an event in which the theme park is transformed into 160 acres of horror via a series of roaming monsters, terrifying mazes, and scare zones. Scare House in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, uses the research of former guest and fear expert Margie Kerr to create a wild set of adventures, most notably The Basement, an R-rated attraction that contains high voltage effects, very low lighting, tight spaces, strong scents, profanity, moments of complete darkness, water, violent scenarios, and high-impact scares. They also note, not recommended for pregnant women or people with heart conditions or respiratory problems, no cell phones, and my favorite part, no customers with pacemakers. Comfortable shoes are recommended. Aside from these big-budget spectacles, there are many more homemade haunts, ranging from small setups on the front porch on Halloween night to larger productions that take weeks to set up and envelop garages, driveways, and entire yards. Today, we will be looking at the haunted house phenomena and speaking with a couple who run one of Canada's largest homemade haunts. But before we get to that, our Halloween season is underway. The first week was a big success. Thank you to everyone who came out. I actually got out on a tour myself last night, had a great time, and you may hear a little bit of that experience in a few weeks on the show. I did get a question recently about our premium tour experiences in each city, so thought I should mention that. These premium adventures tend to be the last tours of the evening, often near midnight when the tour's reaching its climax. These adventures also feature smaller group sizes and give us a chance to spend a little more time in some of each city's most haunted buildings. In Toronto, on our original Haunted Walk, we get to venture inside Mackenzie House. On the original Haunted Walk of Ottawa, we get to go inside the Bytown Museum. On the Ghosts on the Gallows Are You Afraid of the Dark tour in Ottawa, we get to venture inside the old jail. And with all of these tours, each one is kind of customized to the particular location, so we may have some extra challenges for you to take part in, or some adventures to get up to while you're inside a haunted building. Our premium original Haunted Walk of Kingston will also include a visit to Skeleton Park, one of the city's infamous hidden burial grounds. And in Toronto, we also have our premium Haunted Walk experience at Black Creek Pioneer Village. And from personal experience, I can tell you, being in the village late at night is well worth the price of admission. Extremely creepy back there, and we just have some tremendous stories about that location, and even some first-hand encounters that some of our guests have had. For information about all our premium tours and everything we have going on during the Halloween season, please visit our website, which is hauntedwalk.com. We are very busy these days on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we'd love to connect with you on those three, all at Haunted Walk. I clearly remember the very first haunted house I went through. I was 8 or 9 at the time. It was summer camp, and the counselors and some of the older kids turned a stage in the gymnasium into a scary little haunt. We were blindfolded and led through, and I clearly remember having my hand put into a bowl of human eyeballs. Of course, they were only grapes, but in the imagination of a young kid, it was certainly very effective and memorable. But perhaps the funnest part was later getting the chance to help run the experience and being able to see everyone else scared silly, which is something I still enjoy today. Millions of people each year journey into the dark for an adventure inside a haunted house or a haunt. Here we're talking about a location that doesn't necessarily have a haunted history to it, though sometimes that's the case, as with our own seance at Black Creek, but more of a constructed experience designed to make guests scream, cry, and shudder in terror. But why do we want to subject ourselves to this? Being scared is a bit of a strange thing, particularly when we're in groups, because sometimes it can be fun to be scared, and at other times it is the worst feeling imaginable. I mentioned sociologist Margie Kerr in the opening of the show, who is our guest in episode 25 on the science of fear, and she explained to us how this distinction works.
Yeah, and that's what my colleague and I have really focused on, is looking at the boundaries of fun scary. Under what conditions is this fun, therapeutic, or helpful? And it really starts with choice and safety, ironically. And this is something that I'm always talking to a lot of haunted attractions about, is that the critical importance of people recognizing that your establishment, that the experience is safe, because that's what then allows them to lean in, to engage in the experience. When we're really in a threatening situation where we don't know what's going to happen, where we don't feel safe, that's where it could potentially lead to trauma and definitely not having a good time. But when we know that we're in a safe place, we can push ourselves and challenge ourselves. A lot like rock climbing, or even running a marathon. It's the ability to choose to push yourself that then can open an opportunity for growth and feeling like you've challenged yourself and you've achieved something. And yes, growth can definitely come from scary experiences that are not of your choice. But if you're looking for something that is going to give you a boost of confidence, that's going to be a kind of just quick pick me up, then doing something safe scary is a good bet.
And when we typically imagine scary scenarios in our mind, I think we often imagine ourselves alone, without any help, left to our own devices, unsure what's going to happen, lost in a strange place or in a haunted building or something of that nature. But I would say one of the observations we have made over our 20 plus years is that our tour groups that seem to get the most frightened or have the strongest visceral reactions are often the ones that have larger groups of friends or family within them, considerably more so than, say, if we have 10 couples who don't know each other in a group. Now, this seems at first glance very counterintuitive, because you expect with the support of your friends and family that maybe things wouldn't be that dramatic for you or that frightening for you. But you point out in the book there is a connection between the pleasure of fear and group dynamic.
Yes, this is one of my favorite things to look at, too, because it's such a nice combination of sociology and psychology. When we're with people that we really care about, we can enhance each other's emotions. So it's almost like our emotions become contagious in a way, not of course in a real way, but in a way that we have studied, and there's actually a really great article. I don't talk about it in the book, but it looks at family and friends watching their loved ones walk on coals, and they measure people's physiological reactions, while that's happening, and they see that, when you are watching someone you care about do something scary or just emotionally intense, you feel it too in a real way. Your body responds in a similar way. And so we enhance the experience when we're with people that we really care about. And I think that's a very, cool thing that's likely adapted over our evolution, that helps us, be there for each other in times of stress, and also bonds us more closely together. And so that's why, it's so much fun to do these things with friends and family, because we're feeding off of each other's emotional experiences. It can also work the other way. If you're with someone that you don't like and you distrust, there's been studies showing that it can increase your distrust of them, so that you're, further avoiding them. But, if you're with people that you really love and care about, it can intensify it and bring you closer together.
The origins of the modern-day haunted house trace back to the early days of 19th century London, England, when a series of attractions introduced the public to new forms of gruesome entertainment. A British woman named Mary Tussaud had made wax death masks of decapitated figures from the French Revolution, including King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. When she opened her Chamber of Horrors in London in 1802, it startled and disturbed audiences, and it remained a crowd favorite until it closed in 2016. Today, there are over 20 Madame Tussaud wax museums located around the world, many of them still having scary or frightening scenes. The first recorded haunted attraction was the Orton and Spooner Ghost House, which opened in 1915 in Liphook, England. This attraction resembles most closely to what we would call a carnival house or a fun house today. What's really unique about this too is that it was powered by steam. During the Great Depression, as American kids had really perhaps gone too far with Halloween and were becoming a bit of a public nuisance at that time of year, they essentially tried to buy the kids off by creating these scary experiences, something to keep them out of trouble. Now, the first haunted houses were very primitive. Groups of families would decorate their basements and hold these house-to-house parties. Trick-or-treaters would travel from basement to basement to experience different scary scenes. A party pamphlet from 1937 describes how parents could design these trails of terror to spook kids in the neighborhood. The effects may seem less than frightening today, but at the time were quite powerful. Reading from it. An outside entrance leads to a rendezvous with ghosts and witches in the cellar or attic. Hang old fur strips or raw liver on the walls, where one feels his way in the dark. Weird moans and howls come from dark corners. Damp sponges and hairnets hang from the ceiling, touch his face. Doorways are blocked, so the guest must crawl through a long, dark tunnel. At the end, he hears a plaintive meow and sees a black cardboard cat, outlined in luminous paint. Maybe not the big payoff we expect in a haunted house today, but you can see where some of these traditions have continued through. In 1969, the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland opens to the public and instantly becomes one of the most beloved attractions in the park and really a cultural force. We did an entire episode on Disney's Haunted Mansions. That's episode 16, which I would highly encourage you to check out because I'm a really big fan of the Haunted Mansions. In the 1980s, the popularity of horror films such as Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street continued to push haunted houses to new and dramatic heights. Today, behind the walls at Eastern State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania, one of the biggest haunted attractions in the world, has hundreds of performers and Hollywood-level special effects, makeup, and prosthetics. Reading from their website, Terror Behind the Walls begins with a critical decision for visitors. Should they explore the prison and watch the action? Or should they mark themselves to truly interact with the denizens of the cell blocks? Those who opt in for true interactivity may be grabbed, held back, sent into hidden passageways, and even temporarily separated from the other members of their group. They will deal with the consequences of their decision through 6 long interactions. How's that for a challenge? While I would love to try each and every one of these big budget, big scale attractions, the haunted house movement has always had a strong DIY, a do-it-yourself philosophy at its core. I am always amazed at the families or communities that spend enormous amounts of time, energy, and money building homemade haunts they will offer up to the public for free or for a donation to a local charity. There's a purity to that I find unbelievably cool. I wanted to chat with one of these families to find out how it all works. So I reached out to Karyn and David Torbett, whose Tunnel of Terror at their home in Niagara Falls is one of the biggest homemade haunts in Canada. So my first question is, let's start by going back to the summer of 2010, before you built the first iteration of the Tunnel of Terror. How did you decide to start doing this, and what were your initial motivations?
So we've always been involved in Halloween our first Halloween together back in the mid-'90s. We spent volunteering our time in a museum, and then we would always make sure our kid had the best Halloween costumes as he was growing up. And by the time he turned 14 years old, he finally turned around and said, "You know what, parents? You're not coming out anymore. I'm going to go with my buddies. You know, you got to find something else to do." So Karyn and I kind of looked at each other like, well, what do we do? And from there, we kind of came up with the idea of building our own little haunted house. And our first tunnel was only like a 16-foot in and out little walkthrough. And, you know, you'd walk through, see Karyn at the end, and then just walk back through the same way you came in. And we had a couple scares that would work. But it was just a tiny little thing. And it's come a long way since then.
So 9 years later, I imagine there have been some very significant changes to the experience. And you've already started a little bit, but could you describe in a little more detail what that first year was like, and maybe compare that to what the experience is going to be like this year?
That first year, like I said, it was sort of a small kind of go. It was a 16-foot tunnel, and that's all it was. It was just you walk down our sidewalk. You know, basically I built this wooden structure and tarped it over. You walk down and you would, you know, see the witch at the end of the tunnel, get your candy and make your way back out. And, you know, I would try and, you know, scare you a couple times as you're going in and out. Today's experience is a lot different than what it was. We're now building over 1,000 square feet of temporary structure. It is completely watertight. We use a brand new poly system over the whole roof, so it never leaks. Even if it's raining outside, you're completely dry inside of our event. We now have 7 rooms, about 75 or 80 feet of tunnel you have to walk through. There's a corn walk, and we have like roughly 20 people per night inside of there that are dressed appropriately. This year we're building a witch's house, so all of our actors will be donning witches clothing or warlocks clothing, but they don't have to be traditional witches and warlocks either. They can be modern day, you know, versions of whatever it is, but that's sort of the theme we're going with. And so you can't even compare our first tunnel to what we build now. It's a totally different animal altogether.
So has each year had its own different theme?
Yes. So every year it's always been slightly different. And in the last 5 years or so, once we got into the property that we're at now, we really started branching out in our backyard. We realized we're on a corner lot and we could really sort of make different themes with it. So the first couple of years we lived here, it was just a series of themed rooms that sort of worked. Last year, we actually built our first full-on themed build, which was the Bones Family Manor. And then this year, we decided to go take that a little further and create a witch's compound, and we're calling it Hazel's House.
And what type of scares will visitors find inside? Is this something that the whole family can enjoy, or is it something maybe an elevated level of scares where it's for, you know, older kids or adults?
It's for everyone, really. We have 3-year-old little children that go through that love it, and we have grown men who literally cry. So it's pretty much for everyone. But this year we are opening an hour earlier, and we're going to have no live actors from 5 to 6. And then from 6 to 10, it's going to be enter at your own risk.
Nice. And how many visitors are you expecting this year?
Our Facebook event page has had nearly 46,000 people touch it. So
Wow.
I have no idea. We've never seen numbers like this. I'm not sure if it's the name this year, because I keep pushing Hazel's House, Hazel's House, Hazel's House, or I don't know what it is, but we've never seen these numbers. So last year we had 1,224 people, and this year I hope for 1,500.
I'd love to hear some more about how it all kind of comes together. When do you start planning and when do you start building?
Okay, so typically with the planning, as I'm building it this year, we're sort of planning next year's. And, you know, next year we're going to build it like this. And, you know, so you're sort of already pre-planning the year afters as you're building this year. Once things are in motion, there's really no time to change things or make big epiphanies and let's do this instead, because there's barely enough time to build this thing as it is. This year we started the 3rd weekend of August. And I've been out there every weekend since. I've got a good friend who comes out with his nephew, and they volunteer their time. We've been building this thing 8-10 hours a day, each day on the weekends. We just finished framing on the weekend. So that tells you how long it takes actually just to get walls and ceiling structures up. We get into like load-bearing beams because the ceiling is just so big, because it's such a big structure that I have to make sure that I can transfer my loads to like load-bearing walls, which go right into the ground and so on. But, you know, it's just temporary structure. So there's a lot of engineering that goes in, but it all comes apart and packs back up into a nice little kit and tucks away in our backyard. Ultimately, I take the week before we open, I take it off from work, and I'm out there every day for probably 12 to 14 hours a day doing all the decorating. We take it to so many levels, from some really great lighting to fog and netting and cobwebs to what I call fluff and filler, but it's actually like all the potion bottles we spend time building every year. We've probably got, upwards of 80 or 90 different jars full of different colored liquids and stuff with eyeballs and fingers and ears and all kinds of stuff, and these are all, we've been building these over the years. We've got a huge collection of skulls and bones and stuff like that. So we use all of these things over and over and over again, and we come up with new ideas to keep reusing these old products and great ways to reinvent the wheel over and over and over again with these things. A lot of what I've got, like in terms of the walls, a couple of these walls are original walls from our first tunnel, and we just keep reusing these things over and over again. It sort of keeps us on budget, as we do budget about $1,000 a year out of our own pocket to buy new tarps, new wood, a few new props, new costumes, make sure that, we've got food and water and pizza and stuff for our volunteers and all that. So reusing things, is really a key thing. Now, I work in construction as well, so I'm able to get my hands on people's old doors and old windows. We're able to incorporate that into our build. So if you've seen pictures of our front end, it looks like an old house, but it's really it was built in the last couple of years, but it looks like it's been there for 50 or 60 years and it's run down and worn out. And it's just taking old fence and old parts and making it look, like something that it isn't. On the inside of it, it looks like a Hollywood set. You can see the tarps and the framing and everything. It doesn't look spooky at all, but from the outside, it looks really proper.
Now, given the scale and scope of the event, have you ever had any problems with the neighbors? I mean, from the build to the event days, it seems like there's a lot going on the property. Any problems at all with any bad sports?
Nothing at all of the sort. In fact, most of our neighbors are at least somewhat involved, or standing behind us and helping to talk about it and spread the word. One of our neighbors actually does concert sound as a second job, and he donates his time and his equipment. And we set him up in our shed with, he's got a proper monitor mixing board, and we send a monitor out to each of the separate rooms, and he sends a different channel out there. My wife has a cordless microphone, so she can communicate with the whole tunnel, right over the whole PA system above the music and everything else. And that also works to call me out when somebody shows up and I'm busy in the tunnel doing something, and she can call me out and I can hear it over the PA system as well. So the whole neighborhood is definitely involved in one way, shape, or form. And if nothing else, they used to get 7 kids at Halloween, and now they get hundreds, and they really appreciate seeing all the kids in costumes and stuff. It sort of brings childhood back to the neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely. And while the Tunnel of Terror is meant to be a frighteningly fun experience, it's much more than that. And shortly after you began, you made the decision to make it a charity event by donation. Why was that important to you, and whom are you raising money for this year?
We met somebody who was very, very influential to us. So he's the drummer of a major rock band, and he does a ton of stuff for all kinds of charities, from kids with cancer to local food banks and these kind of things. And he's constantly doing these things. So as we got to know this guy, how was a good influence on us. And so we basically took a couple pages out of his playbook and decided to make our own little Halloween event into something a little bit bigger and raise money for our local food bank, which is Project Share. And we decided to incorporate, a couple years later, we decided to incorporate cancer. Everybody's been touched by cancer in one way, shape, or form. And having a child with cancer, it can't even imagine how immensely difficult it can be. So we decided to just raise money for them. The bills don't stop. They have to go up to Hamilton to the hospital, and they've got to pay for parking and the gas and all those things. But it can't work, so our money just goes towards that. So this year we're raising money for a 3-year-old little girl. Her name is Violet Smith, and she has a very rare aggressive brain tumor. She spent more than half of her life in a hospital, and this family's only had one fundraiser, and they need the help. And, it can't imagine what they go through in a day-to-day just trying to deal with a sick child like that. And, we're lucky. We're blessed. We have a 23-year-old son who's healthy. We're lucky, all those ways. And these people unfortunately don't have that luxury. So that's where, we sort of just try and help out a little bit, maybe make their day a little brighter by helping out with just a bit of financial, I guess.
And that kind of leads to perhaps a difficult question is, which gives you more enjoyment? Really, when you get a great scare in and get a great reaction from the folks who are attending? Or is it really that when you're able to make that charitable donation and really make a profound difference?
Actually, both, because when we have the chance to meet that little child, either at the beginning or at the end of this, that is something that I can't even describe. And then to scare people, it's just so much fun. So I would say both, hands down. I can't even pick.
To touch on that further, those 5 nights that we are open, the most amazing things happen. We see people we haven't seen in years. They come out. Family members from out of town come out. It's really the craziest 5 days of the whole year. And the fact, we can turn this around and help somebody out as a result of all of this and our hard work, that my wife puts in social media. She's been working so hard at getting the word out there about this little girl and her story. It's really satisfying when, we're able to take that box of money over to them and just do it that way. Like it's hard to pick one part better than the other. That's for sure.
Now, we do have listeners from around the world, and obviously a lot of Halloween lovers in that group. Would you have any suggestions for them if they're considering building their own much smaller scale scares, perhaps for Halloween night, or any expert advice you could pass on to our listeners?
Start small, but dream big, I guess. If you're creative, you can build it. You don't have to be a carpenter. You don't have to be, if you're just determined enough, start making your own props. That's the most inexpensive way of doing things. And the ability to reuse and recycle a lot of products is definitely a good way to do it as well. And probably one of my number one sources of free material are pallets. So if you're looking to do anything in terms of getting started, use pallets because it's a free source of lumber to build all kinds of great props. I've seen, builds where they've used it for walls and everything. So pallets are another big way of getting them started with things, is it's free wood.
Looking back over the past 9 years, what do you think would be the most surprising or challenging element that you have to contend with or deal with that people who are not running their own haunted houses may not be aware of?
For me, it's building the roof. The roof is probably the biggest, most important part of the whole structure, as that's what keeps everybody dry and safe and out of the weather, and it keeps all of our props dry as well. Each year the weather is different, and a lot of times we're dealing with some kind of moisture coming in one way, shape, or form. So the roof for me takes an awful lot.
And getting the people to the event is probably one of the hardest things because you have to get the word out. So we make event postcards and we hand them out as much as we can. I have social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I pump it out as much as I can. It may be annoying, but I do my best to get the word out. It seems that it's working well this year.
And I imagine that's one thing is you kind of got to wear a lot of different hats. You got to be a marketer. You've got to be the construction builder, design, kind of the narrative aspects, crowd control, all that stuff I imagine must play a part.
Yeah, so I take care of getting the people here, and Dave takes care of the build. And then we also have one of our friends that's out front controlling the crowd by acting as Mike Myers. He may not be controlling them very well, but he chases them to their cars, and yeah, quite the event over here.
That's awesome.
I like to look at it as she's the brains and I'm the brawn.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, my final question is really, what days will you folks be running this year, and where should our listeners go if they're interested in finding out more information?
We're running October 27th to October 31st this year from 6 to 10 p.m. We're also opening up an hour earlier, like I mentioned, just for the smaller kids or grown men who are scared. From 5 to 6. So there'll be no live actors from 5 to 6, and then 6 to 10 is enter at your own risk. You can check us out on Facebook at the Tunnel of Terror presents Hazel's House, or on Instagram, Tunnel of Terror Official, and on Twitter, Tunnel of Terror.
A big thank you to Karyn and David Torbett for joining us. We wish them all the best this season. And if you happen to be around the Niagara Falls area, please be sure to check out the Tunnel of Terror and support them. We would love to see some photos of the Tunnel of Terror or any other haunted houses you may go to this Halloween season. And you can share those with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at Haunted Walk. As always, thank you to Jillian Walker-Chuck, our expert guest wrangler, Michelle Dennis, our awesome audio editor, and to Kevin McLeod at Incompetech.com for the additional music. Make sure you get those Halloween season tickets soon. We are selling out fairly quickly, and as a listener to the show, I want to make sure you get the absolute best date and time you are looking for. Information about all our Halloween season activities can be found on our website, which is hauntedwalk.com. If you are enjoying the episodes, a 5-star review for us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to us would be a great way to let us know you're out there and enjoying what we're doing. Until we meet again next week, sweet dreams.